Welcome to KnotWork Storytelling. This is the show where we untangle our myths and reweave our stories, one age-old tale at a time. I'm your host and lead storyteller, Marisa Goudy. I'm a myth worker, a story healer, a coach for writers and creative entrepreneurs, and the author of The Sovereignty Knot, A Woman's Way to Freedom, Power, Love, and Magic. If you love what you hear and want to support the show, I'd be so grateful if you'd become a paid subscriber on Substack. In my newsletter, Myth is Medicine, you'll receive bonus content related to the stories on the show and deep dives into how mythology and folklore can help heal the individual and the collective in the present moment and beyond. There's a link in the show notes to follow Myth is Medicine on Substack, or visit mythismedicine.substack.com. Season 5, Episode 12, A Story About Getting Unstoried. This episode is yet another departure from our typical KnotWork storytelling format. I feel like I've been saying that a lot lately, but it feels like elements of the show just want to shift and evolve. Now, in this story of getting unstoried, I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But first, I wanted to let you know that you have a few more days to join the Writer's Knot. Our global community of writers and creatives is open to new members through September 9th, 2024. If what you hear in this episode resonates, if you've got stories to tell and you want to explore what it means to be unstoried, there's a good chance our writing group is the place for you. You can learn more at my website, marisagoudy.com, and on the registration page, you'll find a place to book a call with me if you want to talk more about whether this is the right group for you. Also, check out the show notes. I'll include a link to book time to chat. Okay, so now let's tell this story of getting unstoried. So the other day, I was talking to a wise friend and colleague. She and I speak freely about life and work and writing. We talk about creativity and sustainability and generativity. And we talk about how to do entrepreneurship well in a system that seems so irrevocably broken. How do we do the work and use our skills and spirit to help people and the planet when we know that profit is complicated and that commodifying authenticity is just one more marketing gimmick? Put another way, we see the man behind the curtain, but we also understand that in this extractive, colonialist, capitalist patriarchy, we're all caught behind the curtain. We've helped to weave it. We're tangled in it. It's the water we swim in, but can barely see. Now, as I said, my friend and I are accustomed to offering one another both directness and compassion. So when she began to speak and then immediately stopped herself and muttered something like, "Oh, I'm not even sure I should even say this," I immediately leaned in. Now, as I was sitting in my car outside my daughter's high school during one of the many, many soccer practices during tryouts weeks, that meant that my chin was essentially on the dashboard. "Now I really need to know," I said. "Well," she said, "I wonder if you ever hide behind the stories." She's good. And her name is Carmen Schreffler. And I highly recommend you check out The Way of the Wildpreneur over on Substack. Tell her Marisa sent you. Now, Carmen and I were talking about my own what's next. We were talking about what had and hadn't been working in terms of the ways I was calling in new writing coaching clients, growing the Writer's Knot community, and building listenership for this show. Because I've worked long and hard to finally feel like I could live up to the title of storyteller. That's Unscaly in the Irish. Finally deciding to commit to my love of mythology and the lore of my Irish ancestors was what got me out of an ungrounded sort of entrepreneurship that always left me wondering what I really had to offer and what it was worth after all. Because stories enabled me to really start doing the work that I love. Stories have given me so much, and I've given so much developing my own voice. What could it mean that I was possibly hiding behind them? Now, Carmen's actually been a podcast guest, so you can hear her kind, generous, grounded wisdom firsthand. Last year, she sat with me as I told a story of Cesar, the exile from the Middle East who led an almost entirely female fleet and became the first person to set foot on the island we now know as Ireland. Carmen's also a member of my Writer's Knot community. She's a writer herself and knows about the space that I hold for writers, which does occasionally call on the stories from this podcast, but which is even more likely to draw together the seasons of the year, the events of the moment, the stars in the sky, the cards from the oracle deck. All of it acts as a space for inspiration for us. So when Carmen says, "I wonder if you ever hide behind the stories," she speaks from a privileged perspective. She knows. She knows a bit about me, the woman behind the stories, and she tells me that I undervalue the unstoried ideas that come through in conversation and when I hold space for my global community. Now, as is often the way with insights that seem a little too wild to be spoken aloud, when you're brave enough to say them, it turns out that they are exactly what needs to be heard. This podcast, as you know, is about telling stories. Nearly all of the 70-something episodes I've released since early 2022 have begun with a story, after all. But that's only half the equation. The other half is the conversation about why these old stories still matter. It's up to the listener, it's up to you, to decide whether the two halves are equal in terms of importance and resonance. Now, surely, for me at least, it's a fluid continuum that's more about relationship and the way that one segment supports the other, rather than something that we could easily rank. So what's more essential then? The story or the meaning making? For me, both are. But to come back to Carmen's point, it's possible and necessary to occasionally look at the relationship between them and determine how I dance between these intrinsically related poles, the story and the meaning making. I think this relationship is important for all of us, whether you're a myth worker like me, taking the old stories and consciously bringing them through a modern lens, or whether you're a more general fiction writer, seeking to craft a strong plot and say something about what it means to be alive. Or you might be a memoirist, seeking to convey what happened in the past and trying to make that element of your own history say something important about who you are now and what is universally true. I think we're all meant to create within and beyond the dualities, to get free of any hard and fast distinctions between offer the audience a good story and give them something to think about. Now, Carmen's question pressed on some ideas that hadn't really yet come to the surface for me. Often when I tell new acquaintances that I have a storytelling podcast, they say something like, "Oh, that's great. I'll have to tell my son. He loves stories." With all respect, this show was never made for 9-year-olds. Occasionally, my own elementary school kiddo will ask to listen, and I'll carefully scan the archives for stories that might be of interest. And I always click stop as the grown-up conversation begins. Now, I think it's to our collective detriment that adults hear storytelling and just about always think it's kid stuff. What they're really saying is that a single voice telling a story from a distant past feels like a childish occupation. Our whole entertainment galaxy, from superheroes to hobbits to stormtroopers, that shows us how stories about fantastical times and places really are important to us. We love an epic. We're not quite sure what to do with it when it's spoken by one quiet voice. But because this whole conversation is about the both and of it all, it's important to remember that most adults think they live in the quote-unquote real world that's devoid of storytelling. We watch the news, not just fantasy movies, right? But then we need to remember that we read and watch news stories, and that everything comes through the filter of a news media system that's run by money and human biases, and they can never really be impartial. Storytellers all. And our story gets more and more tricky when we start to think about it in the therapeutic or healing context. How often have I sat with my therapist clients who are working to write their own stories, or in my own healing school classes, and we've discussed how we need to release our old stories about the past and about our own health. That's the way to really live with freedom, right? That's a whole other tangle, and I don't think I can tease it all out today. other than to say that we need stories and we also need to be freed of our stories, and that both are true. The magic is in the contradiction, in the way we are asked to hold two conflicting ideas in the heart at the same time. I want to share with you a prompt that I offered the Writer's Knot a couple of weeks ago. It goes like this. Most prompts in the Writer's Knot include the phrase, tell the story of ... Stories are necessary. Stories make us human. And we may set limitations on our understanding of the more than human world when we impose story on everything we encounter. Be with an unstoried place, creature, or experience. Dare to strip away the story and be with what is. Allow this to be both possible and impossible. Allow yourself to resort to metaphor and even tell the story of how you tried to write without imagining the story of it all. I think my writers had a good time with this prompt, and I think that they struggled with it and got a little bit mad at it. And that was exactly what my intention was. The idea for this prompt and this whole concept of what it means to get unstoried, which synchronistically happened just the week before Carmen and I were speaking, emerged from a conversation with a writing coaching client of mine who's working on a gorgeous book about the union with the soul. She's rooting her ideas in a set of creation myths that we think we know so well. But then, as with any true spiritual book, the story needs to fall away. The soul and the spirit realm, as I understand them, are unstoried places. And we know that story is an inherently human phenomenon. It's a beautiful phenomenon. And I believe the folks who say that stories are what make us human. But the spirit realm is not a human space, and it does not work according to human rules. There is no beginning, middle, or end. There is no plot. There isn't a single protagonist, and there certainly aren't any heroes. In the spirit realm, everything is setting, and there is no setting. You certainly can't nail down a time period in the eternal now, so pacing isn't an issue either. You're a KnotWork listener. You know how I love to read and retell the stories of the gods and goddesses of mythology. And I absolutely believe that those stories are true, at least in the sense that they convey something true about human nature and about our relationship to the natural world. But I also believe that many of the great myths and mythic characters were human co-creations. Our ancestors made their holy interpretations of dreams and landscapes, passions and weather systems, tragedies and climate shift. And through those exercises in meaning-making, timeless stories emerged. But not every myth. I also believe that there are some stories that are the truest of the true. I think that cracks open between this world and the next, and there are gods and goddesses and other sacred beings who've crossed over into our time. I think there are tales that reveal something real about the other world, about the spirit level, about the soul. I think there are stories that reveal truths of the much, much vaster, more than human world. As for which is which, what stories are a human co-creation and what stories give us an actual glimpse of divine nature? Well, I think that's something we each work out for ourselves in the depths of the individual mythic heart. It's the only way to find our way to the collective, after all. So as I draw this particular episode to a close, I want to return to that question. What does it mean to hide behind stories? And what does it mean to get unstoried? What does it mean to still retain all of the beauty and magic that comes with being a story lover and a storyteller, even when we know that there's so much to gain when we release the old stories that hold us back? I'm going to keep exploring that on the page myself, and I'll be diving into it on my Substack newsletter, Myth is Medicine. These ideas will influence a series of upcoming episodes that I think may break from the form we've grown accustomed to in the nearly 3 years since this KnotWork adventure began. And I want to invite you one more time to explore all of these paradoxes and sacred contradictions with us in The Writer's Knot. This is my online global community of writers and people who love to write and who want to create a more conscious, fulfilling writing practice. Some members of the group are storytellers. Others are working on novels and memoir. Some folks have big projects that have long been in the works and just look for the community, accountability, and holding to help move them forward. Others show up for the prompts that I provide in each session and surprise themselves anew on the page because they know that to write is to uncover what they think and feel. We all gather together to write with these prompts, like the one I shared about getting unstoried. And then every other month, we gather together for a deep dive conversation in our writers' salons, where we share work, discuss the creative process, and build friendships with people from around the world. Right now, I'm running 2 groups concurrently in hopes of making the community accessible, no matter what your time zone. You're welcome to join us at 7 p.m. Eastern on Mondays or noon Eastern on Wednesdays. We have a couple of seats open in each group, and if you're interested in telling stories and doing the meaning making that takes us beneath and beyond the human habit of storytelling, I would love to have you with us. Visit my website, marisagoudy.com, for more details about The Writer's Knot. And as I said at the top, you can also set up a quick chat with me to talk about whether the group is a good fit for you. But do hurry. Doors are open until September 9th. As ever, I want to thank you for exploring the storied and the unstoried with me, for really diving into the ancient myths and looking for how they resonate with us today, what kind of myths we're creating for ourselves here in the present moment, to test how healthy they are for us, to test what they're really trying to reveal to us, to seek together some new level of understanding. Deepest thanks. Catch you soon. Thank you for tuning in to the KnotWork Storytelling Podcast. Please subscribe and review the show on your favorite podcast platform, and do share this episode with other lovers of myth and story. By the way, everyone is a lover of myth and story, even if they've forgotten. Creating this show is a labor of love, and your support will help me continue to craft and share stories through this season and beyond. Please consider becoming a subscriber to my paid newsletter, Myth is Medicine. You'll find it on Substack, and that's where all my newest writing and occasional bonus podcasts can be found. You can learn more about my writing, my book, our online creative community, The Writer's Knot, as well as how to work with me as a writing coach over at marisagoudy.com. Gratefully, I live, write, work, and record this podcast on the ancestral lands of the Munsee Lenape tribe, whose name means original people.